Prithvi Shantirantariksha Shantir Dyav Shantir Disha Shantiravantaram Disha Shantiragni Shantir Vayu Shantiraditya Shantish Chandrama Shantir Nakshatrani Shantirapa Shantiroshadaya Shantir Vanaspataya Shantir Gau Shantiraja Shantirashva Shantir Purusha Shantir Brahma Shantir Brahmana Shantir Shantireva Shanti Shantir Me Astu Shantihi. May there be peace on earth and in the sky. May there be peace in the water and in all directions. May there be peace in the plants, in the trees, and in animals. May there be peace in the hearts of all beings. May there be peace in everyone and in everything. Sarvetra sukhinas santu, sarve santu niramayaha, sarve bhadrani pashyantu, ma kaschit dukkha bhag bhavet, sarvastaratu durgani, sarvo bhadrani pashyatu, sarvas sadbuddhimapnotu, sarvas sarvatra nandatu. May all be happy and healthy. May all see what is good, and may no one experience misery. May all overcome their obstacles and acquire good tendencies. May people everywhere find joy and fulfillment. Let us now spend some time touching the center of peace and joy in our hearts. A good way to begin the practice is to withdraw the scattered energies of the mind and bring them to rest on one point. That point can be our own breathing. Let us therefore practice breathing with awareness. As we breathe in, let us visualize that our body and mind are being filled with love, strength, and compassion. And as we breathe out, let us release all the stress, anxiety, and exhaustion in the body and mind. Let us practice this way for a while. Let us now turn our attention to the region of our heart. Although God is present everywhere and in everyone, the divine presence can be felt most clearly in our own hearts. We can meditate in any way we have been taught. To remain focused, we can take the help of a short mental prayer or a mantra or a divine name. Let us now spend some time dwelling on the presence of God in our hearts. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om. We are very happy to have with us this morning Pravrajika Vrajaprana. Many of you have had a chance to hear her before, and those of you who will be hearing her for the first time today. Vrajaprana ji is the senior nun of the Ramakrishna order. She's from the Vedanta Society in Southern California, in Santa Barbara. She's a prolific writer and editor. One of her books, especially Vedanta, A Simple Introduction, has become an all-time classic. It's being prescribed in many schools and colleges. The book that we are studying on Wednesdays, Viveka Chudamani, Looking Deeply, and I'm grateful to Sister for editing and helping in the editing of that manuscript. So we are very happy to have her in our midst today, and she will reflect on learning from nature. Please welcome Pravrajika Vrajapranaji.
God, I'm short. Good morning. I'm really happy to be here again after a long time. We're now in the season of Divine Mother. We had our Durga Puja in Santa Barbara, and we're going to have our Kali Puja in Hollywood coming up November 4th, and then we move into the Jagadatri Puja. So this autumn is the season of the Divine Mother, and there's no better time to talk about Mother Earth than this season of the Divine Mother. Because, as we know, every tradition, every culture on the planet has always seen Earth as mother, has always been part of this divine feminine. In the Hindu tradition, she is quite literally a goddess. She is Bhumi, or Bhudevi. She is the mother of Sita. The Earth is quite literally a goddess to be revered and to be worshipped. And Hinduism has traditionally never seen Earth as a big bucket to plunder. Rather, she is to be treated with love and respect and appreciation. The Atharva Veda said, "The Earth is my mother and I am her child." This is sort of the antithesis of the old Judeo-Christian tradition, which said, God says that man is to have dominion over the fish of the sea and over the birds of the heavens and over all the lands and all the creatures that cover the lands and anything that moves upon the earth, that we are to have dominion over them, putting us at the apex of creation. But you know, that directive may not have been the best idea. It didn't turn out well for anybody. So we kind of overdid this lordship business. So when we have this scenario of God telling us that we're in charge, we're the top of the pyramid, everything is going down and we're in charge, this is a little more than self-serving, and it really has not turned out well for anybody. Since very ancient times, the Hindu tradition has really emphasized the sanctity of nature and the total interconnectedness of life. No one's on the top. The earth is seen as a living, the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, for example, sees the earth as a living, responsive being we have this loving and nurturing relationship with her. It says, the earth is like honey for all beings, and all beings are like honey for this earth. The intelligent, immortal being, the soul of this earth, and the intelligent, immortal being, the soul within the individual being. Each is honey to each other. Each is honey to each other, and Brahman is the soul in each. Brahman is indeed the self in all. Brahman is all. So the earth and all of her creatures, all beings, are meant to have this loving, reciprocal, nurturing relationship with each other. And it's based on this unity and the divinity of all existence. That's the whole basis, the whole reason for this whole deal. You know, several months ago, I went up to help out my niece up in Portland, outside Portland, because she had just had her first birth and she had fraternal twins, and her mother passed away many years ago and her father can't get up there. So I thought, oh, I'm her aunt, I can go up and give her a hand for a few days. I had no idea. I'd never dealt with an infant in my life. Surprise, twins. So we've got two little infants screaming their bloody heads off, and I'm going, what do I do with these things? Okay, you go da 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 da, sing Rama bhajans, sing, move them around, do whatever you can. Finally, the little girl, who was much more active, much more vocal, sleeping less, active more, It's like, what do we do with this kid? So I would just go outside the door. It was 100 degrees plus. Go outside, da-da-da, put her under the tree. She'd go from 120 to 0. She'd go, meow! And she'd just look up at the tree. She'd be screaming her head off. And then all she would do is look up at that tree. She'd go, ow! And I thought, that kid's really got it together. This kid really, she'd be screaming until she was under the canopy of that tree. And then somehow she would connect to the canopy of the tree, and she would kind of tune into all the peace and the tranquility that went into being under the canopy of the tree. And I thought, everybody ought to do this. Instead of just screaming at each other, why don't we just go under a canopy of a tree? Because somehow she understood that her umbilical cord was now connected to that tree. And I thought, well, that's kind of true too, because everything that we know about this earth and our bodies, it all goes to these same material elements. We're all connected. We're all created from these elements from which these trees and plants are created, and unto them we're going to go when we dissolve as well. The wildlife biologist Douglas Chapman, who wrote this fantastic book called 4/5 a Grizzly, said, being one with nature sounds like an aspiration, but it really isn't, because we already are one with nature. And that's speaking from a point of view of a biologist. The Hindu tradition, more than any other tradition in the planet, has really emphasized the oneness of all existence, the unity of all life, and sees, for example, that Brahman is everything and Brahman is in everything. And it is filled with Brahman whether we're aware of it or not. We are, in some deep subliminal way, we're totally aware of this. And the Hindu scriptures tell us that all plants and all trees are sacred, and they have consciousness, and we're connected through that consciousness, that they're all to be revered and they're not to be simply used and tossed. Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, my energy enters the earth, sustaining all that lives. I have become the moon, the giver of water and sap, to feed the plants and the trees. The Chandogya Upanishad very famously said, Sarvam Kalvidam Brahman, all this is indeed Brahman. All this is divine. Divinity is the root of all this oneness of existence. It's at the root of everything of life. And what's amazing and actually quite heartening is this is now being borne out in physics and even now in biology. Ernest Schrödinger, the famous physicist, said quantum physics reveals a basic oneness in the universe. Biology tells us that we're deeply connected to every being in ways that we don't even sense or even know about, but maybe we're subliminally aware of. For example, we share 84% of our genes with dogs. It's like, oh, well, who doesn't love it? We all love dogs, right? They're so cute. They got big eyes. You can tell they're so sweet. We share 85% of our genes with mice. Ew, mice. Right. We share somewhere between 80 and 90% of our genetic material with grizzly bears, who are alarmingly just like us. They're very playful. They stand up. I've seen it myself. They stand up on their hind legs. They're creative. They are aggressive, just like human beings. They have their ability to deliberate. They check things out. They plot things up. They can postpone gratification when they know there's a better treat around the corner. They are amazingly dexterous. I can tell you that from personal experience. They are very dexterous. They are so much just like us. When I learned this, when I was going, oh my God, up to 90% of the same gene sequence that we have. And then I thought of, oh right, Jambavan. Jambavan, the great wise monkey from the Ramayana. Yes, it was only because of Jambavan that Hanuman became aware of his own intrinsic strength, his own divine nature, what he was capable of doing. This divine monkey, who was the most powerful, the fastest being in all the world, it was Jambavan that had to remind him. Now, it's interesting that that Hanuman is considered the perfect devotee, but he has a monkey body. This wise being has a bear body. And shall we talk about Ganesha? Elephant body? That's interesting, isn't it? All these beings are worshipped within the Hindu tradition. Ganesha, everybody worships Ganesha, the most benign, auspicious, remover of obstacles, bringer of success. Now it seems funny, weird, quaint in modern, especially in the West, to have animals being as major players in a religious tradition. But I like to think that the Hindu sages were really on to something. And maybe we're the ones who are not seeing things clearly. That they were much more connected in ways that we are no longer are. And that's what makes the difference. Earlier societies lived much more closely to nature than we did, whether it was plants or trees or animals. And they had much more aware of their kinship with animals than we are now. So now it seems quaint and weird simply because of our own isolation, not because of the reality. For example, we're 4/5 of a genetic match with blue whales. Who doesn't love blue whales? We're 4/5 of a genetic match with bats. Yeah. And the problem is we're so out of touch with other beings that we are both fascinated and kind of creeped out by it. Where in fact, if we lived in the old days, when we lived more closely with nature, this wasn't quite so scary. But the problem is we're all in this together. We can't really separate ourselves from the rest of created nature because we aren't. We aren't. We can't split ourselves up into separate groups because there is no separate group. This does not exist. There is no separation. One of the most charming characters in the Ramayana is the little chipmunk. The little chipmunk. So when the monkeys and the bears are building this bridge to Sri Lanka to rescue Sita, help Rama go and rescue Sita, it's the bears and the monkeys who come and build the bridge. But there's this little chipmunk who's going there, and the chipmunk wants to help too. So the chipmunk goes in there, it's going up, and it's putting a little bit of dirt, little pebbles in its mouth, and it's going up, spitting out little bits to help them build the bridge, and it's just getting in the way. And the bears and the other monkeys say, "Get out of the way! You're just getting in the way." Blah blah blah. Tosses up the poor little chipmunk. But Rama said, "No!" Catches, holds it, puts the little being to his heart, strokes it, which is of course why it has 3 stripes on its back forever and forever. It says, "No. All work is great in its own place. All work, you can't build a bridge without sand. You can't build a bridge without little pebbles. Each is great in its own place. Everything is connected. Each is great in its own place. You can't build a bridge without the chipmunk. Can't have a living organism without every other living organism." Over 500 years ago, Leonardo da Vinci said, "Learn to see. Realize that everything is connected to everything else." That's what we have to learn to see. Because we're all in this together. Every one of us, whether we want to be or not. Whether everything we do, and Vedanta teaches us this, everything we do, everything we think, every action we take, makes a difference in the world, either inside or outside of us, inside of our mind and outside in the external world. Everything makes a difference. We're all part of this one universe. We're all part of this creation one way or the other. And as we've heard here on Sundays, we're all interconnected and all interrelated to each other, and our happiness and our well-being is dependent upon the happiness and well-being of every other being, not just human beings, every other being on the planet. Every other being on the planet. It's no accident that now that anger, hatred, fear, aggression is at all-time high. It's no accident that's happening now. When someone suffers, we all suffer. If a bat in Wuhan gets sick, we all get sick. If the planet gets sick, we all get sick. When the earth is affected, we're all affected. When trees, plants, animals, oceans suffer, we all suffer. Because we're all in it together, we're all connected, we're all interrelated. The chipmunk is every bit as important as we are. Our sense of separation is aggravated by our own sense of separation from the created world, which we're part of. And I'm convinced that this increases our misery because we are really deeply interiorly connected to the outside world. And when we're not part of it, when we're separated from it, it goes against our grain like we're petting a cat the wrong direction. It feels wrong. Because oneness is the law of the universe. And if we go against that law of the oneness of the universe, we make ourselves miserable. Swamiji said, you are one with the universe. Happiness belongs to them who know this oneness, who are aware that they are one with the universe. And that's why, oddly enough, that when we pet an animal, or even play with an animal, whether it be a dog or a cat or a pet bird or a pig or a goat or a sheep, that our cholesterol levels goes down, our dopamine, our feel-good hormones go up, that our stress levels go down, that we just feel better. Why? It doesn't work with a pet, with a play animal. I have to do it with a real being. Why? Because we're connecting with a deeper part of ourselves, with another being. We feel better when we connect with other living, non-human beings. Part of science. When I was a kid, when I went to school, we learned that the smallest building block is the atom. That is the absolute last stage. And there were all these little separate things, and that's our basic building block. And then we discovered more. Oh, now we're talking about particle physics, and now it's like you can go into subatomic particles, and then we discovered the equivalence of matter, and energy, and then we're like, yee. Then we realized that there's no standalone anything. Nothing is a standalone anything. We're all connected to everything else. Nothing stands alone. Quantum theory tells us, weirdly enough, that just by the exact effect of our observing something, we're changing it. Just by the fact that we're looking at something, so we're part of the equation whether we want to be or not. Our very fact of being and seeing something changes it. Fritjof Capra, the physicist, said, quantum theory reveals a basic oneness of the universe. It shows we cannot decompose the world into independently existing separate units. He said, as we penetrate into nature, we see it doesn't show us any isolated building blocks, but rather these complicated web of relationships between various parts of the whole. And that's what we are talking about. That's what Hinduism has been saying for thousands of years. Web of relationships in parts of this big whole. I can't remember when we were going to school, biologists and botanists, we would separate things into genus and species and blood and build them in. And now they realize in order to understand how these beings actually function, we got to put all the pieces back together again. Because nothing makes sense unless it's back together again. Doug Chadwick, again, the author of this the wildlife biologist, said there really isn't an individual life form. He said we're all in symbiosis with one another. It was last month I learned that our mitochondria, which is sort of like our energy within all of our cells, that's basically why we're all alive. Is that because we have this mitochondria? Do you realize it has different DNA than the rest of us? It's like, what? How is this possible? That our mitochondria have DNA? That means it started out as, a parasite? Or bacteria? And then we just became in a symbiotic, now we can't live without each other. It needs us, we need them, just like every other thing on the planet. It needs us, they need us, we need them. That's how it works. We're all in symbiosis. And considering that we are all in symbiosis with one another, it's really no wonder that so many people right now seem one step short of a fit, because we're not acting in a way that really verifies this. It's created every sort of us versus them scenario. And I'm absolutely convinced that the ill health of the planet is really affecting everybody and everything else, mentally and physically. As you all know, eastern part of the United States quite recently was underwater. Everybody was literally drowning in water, just as it was in Germany, in Belgium, and just as it was in Louisiana, maybe now has hit San Francisco, and as we know in India, catastrophic flooding, catastrophic mudslides. Yeah. In the west part where I'm from, we're in the land of dry, drier and drier, hotter and hotter, unbearably hotter, and wildfires. We were burning top to bottom, from all the way from the bottom all the way up to Canada. Who could know that the Arctic Circle could burn? Is that even possible? I mean, I'm so sick of keeping a suitcase for evacuation under my bed. I can't tell you how sick I am of that. That's the way we live. And every year it gets worse. Every year it gets hotter. Every year it gets drier. Over here, okay, it gets wetter and wetter, more and more disasters all the time. And every year it gets worse. That's hottest years, hottest temperatures in history. It's not going to get better immediately, that's for sure. Okay. So all of a sudden, Chicken Little is telling the truth. Sky is falling. Sky is falling. I'm not kidding this time. It really is falling. Okay. What happened? How did it get that way? Now, it's tempting for us good old Vedantists to say, oh, it's Maya. Tell Maya, don't sweat it out. It's Maya. Well, you know what? It's true. It is Maya. The only thing real is the divine. God alone is real. The world is illusory. That is absolutely true. No doubt about it. However, if you believe your body is real, if we think that our body, if in our heart of hearts we believe our body is real, if our heart and hearts we believe that our mind is real, that we believe our relationships are real, that we believe our jobs are real, our kids are real, then we have no business saying that the external world is unreal just because we don't have the courage or the energy to deal with it. That's just hypocrisy. We have to address that. But it's like, if in fact you don't believe your body, mind are real, you're absolutely right. It isn't. It isn't. But if we believe this is real, that's real too. If we believe this is real and this is real, then so is the planet going to hell. That's real too. You know, we stand in our, we always think like, how did it get so bad? Because I remember, it wasn't that long ago that the external world didn't seem that crazy, that threatening. And now it really does. We just don't seem to know what's going to happen next. What happened? Well, the human ego, hubris, our outsized idea about where we stand in relationship to everything else on the planet, this idea that we're at the top of the triangle, instead of this much more, reasonable approach to saying, think of ourselves as part of this great circle of life, that we all are in this great circle together. We're all holding hands in this big old circle of life. This is where we're not the top of the heap. We're not the CEO of creation. We're part of it. We're a part of it. And when we look at it that way, and we see it the way that the sacredness of all life, the sacredness of all beings, then we'll be happier ourselves. The planet will be a lot happier. And we'll be able to relate to the external world in a much more healthy way than we're doing now. You know, human beings are just embarrassingly young on this planet. You know, we've only been here like 350,000 years. 350,000 years, that's it. Trees have been here for 420 million years. 420 million years. And you know what? Sponges have been here for 700 million years. We've only been here a short time. We're like the 2-year-olds on the planet. And like all 2-year-olds, they don't want to share their toys. It's like, we want all the resources. We don't want to play with others. We want to take everything for ourselves. And it isn't working, is it? No. It isn't working for anybody. You can't have a 2-year-old run the household, and you can't have the 2-year-olds of the planet here trying to decide who owns the resources, because it's not working out. Hubert Reeves, who is a Canadian-French physicist, said, "Man is the most insane species. He worships an invisible God and destroys a visible nature. little realizing that he is destroying the very God he is worshiping. Well, a friend of ours, Casey, said, but wait a minute, the indigenous cultures didn't do that. And I said, wait a minute, Hindu sages didn't do that. The older cultures realized this intrinsic divinity that was there. The Bhagavatam says, space, air, fire, water, earth, planets, all creatures, all directions, trees and plants, rivers and seas, they're all organs of God's body. Remembering this, the Bhagavatam says, a devotee respects all species. Swamiji says, the one who loves all beings worships indeed best his God. Loves all beings. He said, the one who loves all beings without distinction, he indeed worships best his God. Our Swamiji. The species that we're talking about, we're deeply connected and deeply interrelated with. Now, we were speaking of the great divine monkey, Hanuman. We have a 99% genetic match with them, gene per gene, in the gene sequencing. Now, this isn't to say that all chimps and all apes are great, wise beings. No, there's plenty of jerks just like human beings. They're all individuals, just like us. Plenty of jerk people, plenty of jerk monkeys, plenty of jerk apes, just like every other being. But I'm not saying they're all great and wise, but I am saying they can't be tossed and thrown away like just another piece of plastic. They're sensitive, they're intelligent, they have pretty much the same emotional range as the rest of us. They deserve to be treated with respect and dignity, just like we demand to be treated with respect and dignity. And like other creatures just like us, they want their life. They want to be treated with the nobility that they deserve. I saw last month some video that was taken outside a laboratory in the Czech Republic, which really, it's kind of made the rounds online, but it was quite fascinating in sort of an appalling, inspiring way. Now, this science place, it's a laboratory at the university, had put some traps outside to catch some boars. And they wanted to catch some boars because they wanted to do experiments with them with some viruses to see how these boars are going to do in experimental conditions with, this and this and this with some viruses. So the camera shows 2 piglets of the boars getting caught in the traps. And it shows, the pigs are squealing, the little piglets are squealing. Well, who comes up but big mama boar, and she's got all of her spines going erect in signs of distress. So then she's making sounds of distress. She's trying to break it down. No, it's not working. It's got all these trap doors in it. 4 other boars show up. They surround her. It's like she communicates to them somehow, and they can see that 2 of the kids are caught in this trap. So they batten it. They're trying to get through. They can't do it because it's all these trap doors. They work together for 25 minutes. They got this thing dimed down second by second in this film. And after 25 minutes, the mama boar figures out how to pick up a log, move it over, hit the trap in such a way that it springs the log, while all the other boars are holding it so the other mama boar can get there, and little piglets run free. All you parents would do the same thing, wouldn't you? Made a deep impression. The great Saint Ramana Maharshi loved all animals, all trees, all plants, and he understood the language of animals, and he communicated with all the animals. There was a cobra that came up, and a peacock that wouldn't leave it alone. So he told the cobra, that peacock's it's going to kill you. You better go away. He slithered away. Okay, that's solved. St. Martin de Porres, Francis of Assisi, also communicated with animals. Ramana, as you know, probably had a very close relationship with Lakshmi, the cow, and he said that Lakshmi attained samadhi at the end. Ramana Maharshi said, "It is not true that birth as a human being is necessarily the highest. Nor is it true that one must attain realization only as a human being. He said even an animal can attain self-realization. You know, I don't know. I haven't attained self-realization, so I can't put an opinion. I'm just saying, this is what he said. I'm just saying, like, hey, maybe we're not the top of the heap. Maybe these animal beings have as right to as much as everybody else. I've got a lot of respect for Ramana Maharshi, that's for sure. Ramana Maharshi suffered a lot for the last 2 years of his life. He had cancer that was kind of eating away at his arm. And I'm sure his body was suffering quite a lot, but he sure didn't show it. He just lived in that beautiful state. And his last words on the planet were, "Have you fed the peacocks?" And that was it. Ciao, baby. He loved all animals and all plants and insects. He would not allow insects to be harmed at the ashram. And we can't separate the insects and the animals and us from the plants and the trees and the plankton, the ocean plankton, that sustain us. Did you know that most of our oxygen comes from the ocean plankton? That's where most of our oxygen comes from, the ocean plankton. When we shouldn't think of trees and plants or plankton as from a utilitarian point of view. It's like, okay, we like you because we need you. You're great. No, they're sentient beings. Trees and plants are absolutely sentient beings. They're sophisticated organisms. Did you know that trees, they live in families, they have their friendships, they nurture and protect each other, they send out warning signs through the fungi in their root system and through pheromones in the air to warn other trees and plants of danger. When a tree dies, they send all their nutrients out to support all the other trees and plants. Did you know that there is a grove of what trees? Okay, Mikhail, what was the name of that? What was the name of that tree? Aspen? Yes, quaking aspen in Utah. There's a grove of aspens in Utah, 80,000 years old. They're all connected to this root system together. And we're all connected to that root system too. We just forget it. And that causes us great suffering. Trees and plants really do, they process information pretty much the same way everybody else does. They just do it much more slowly than everything else. But they process it just the same. They're sophisticated. They communicate. They suffer pain, actually. They have a long memory. If a tree has ever suffered a drought, you ought to come to our place. If they suffer a drought, they'll remember it through the rest of their existence, and they will be very careful with their water consumption until they'll just sip at water until the big rains come. They don't treat all other trees the same way. They've got tree friends. Some trees they don't like. No, I'm going to put my attention over to you. Ignore other ones. They react to pain. As a matter of fact, last month, the University of Tel Aviv published a paper on plants that showed that when plants are in pain, they send high-frequently distress signals out to other plants to warn them when they're in pain. It's no accident that in the Hindu tradition, there's so many trees and plants that are considered sacred. In fact, they're considered so sacred that in the ancient sacred text, if it shows that if trees and plants are destroyed, that means the end is coming. Comes the end of the yuga, baby. When the trees and plants are destroyed, it's over for everybody. Ramana Maharshi cared very deeply for trees and plants and recognized that they were living beings. Once this man came up because he wanted to do service to the great saint and asked him what he could do. And so he said, "The mango tree over there, can you please remove the dead leaves?" So the guy starts hacking away at it. He said, "Guy, stop it, stop torturing the tree." He said, "If I pull you by the hair, won't you feel pain?" He said, "Your hair isn't even alive. This tree is alive." He said, you go. You go. Leave that tree alone. Okay, glad I wasn't that guy. Sri Ramakrishna was out collecting bilva trees one day from a tree. And he noticed that as he was collecting one of those bilva leaves, he had pulled off a little bit from the plant stem itself, pulling off some of its skin. He was so pained by it that he said, I realized that the same divine being within me is the same divine being in that tree. That was the end of his collecting leaves career. That was it. He couldn't do it anymore. Sri Ramakrishna became so sensitive to other beings that when a boatman slapped another boatman from behind when they were in an argument, he shrieked in pain, and this big welt came up on his back. Yeah, how is that possible? Well, when the ego goes down, down, down to nothing, then we become aware of this oneness of all life, the unity of all life. And we see that divinity radiating through every being, every plant, every animal that we have. That's how it happens. So we should ask ourselves, okay, why is it that when we go out into nature, we feel so much better? Why is it that I just feel so much calmer when I'm in a park or under trees or in the garden? Well, if we walk into a park, for example, we may start, let's say we're at lunch break at work. We just decide, I'm not going to sit here at my desk. I'm going to go into the park. When we do that, within a few feet, you know what? Our stress levels go down so dramatically. Our adrenaline and our cortisol levels go down, which gives us all the stress, drops down. Our relaxing hormones go up. We get more, our immune system builds up. Our NK cells, these are the cells that fight off tumors, bacteria, heart disease, depression, these go up. Just by being inside of a park. It's better if we walk, but just by being in the company of the trees and the plants, this happens to our body instinctively without us having to do anything about it, just being in there. Our cytokines, which are the proteins that increase inflammation, the bad guys, that give us heart disease, diabetes, depression, those NK cells that fight it off, those go way up so that we can fight it off. Which is why doctors today sometimes prescribe nature time 3 times a week. Kaiser Permanente has a thing on their website. Try to have some time for nature time. 3 times a week, 1 hour. In Japan and in South Korea, they do forest bathing. We actually go down, lie down in the forest. They're in Japan and South Korea, their insurance companies pay for it? Believe me, if it works, if the insurance companies are putting down money for it, it works. Forest bathing, just being in the company of trees, bathing in that beautiful calm and the tranquility. Many people spend hours and hours a day on computers. Maybe some of you do. We're stuck in traffic. We're in stressful situations. We don't have healthy light. We're separated from our own environment in ways that are very unhealthy. We have to listen to leaf blowers, take in pollution in every sort of way. Traffic, sirens, stress. Well, what happens is that our autonomic nervous system goes into a fight or flight mode. We can't help it. It affects our breathing, it affects our digestion, and it affects our heartbeat. It stresses us out. And that's because we're not hardwired to be in that kind of environment. Because 99.9% of human time on the planet, we've been in a natural environment. We haven't been in an unnatural environment like we are now. And that's why we feel so good when we're in nature, because it feels right. That's what our bodies and minds are programmed to be. So when we go back into nature, it's like, ooh, yeah, that feels good. Well, there's a reason it feels good. Our bodies and minds have been programmed for 350,000 years in that direction. Living out of a natural environment makes us feel out of balance with ourselves. And that's not good for us and not good for anybody else either. Which kind of brings us to the Vedic concept of Rita, which I'm sure you've heard about. This divine cosmic order of harmony and balance. That everything nourishes and protects and sustains each other in this natural, organic harmony. And when we don't nurture and sustain and maintain each other, we move away from Rita, and then things go south very, very fast. And that's exactly what has happened today. When we're not in balance, we suffer and everything else suffers too. We forget the deepest part of ourselves, that divinity that connects us with everything else on the planet. The Hindu tradition has this grand philosophy, Sarvam Kalvidam Brahma, all this is indeed is Brahman, but unfortunately, we humans are so capable of believing one thing and acting in a totally different way. And nothing and nobody can make us act according to our beliefs. Somehow, we can fervently believe in one thing and do something completely different and not have a problem about it. Or at least not consciously. But it isn't working. We're somehow able to divorce our knowledge from daily activities, and it's proving to be fatal for our body and mind and the planet. Because obviously India is suffering now from severe environmental degradation, just as the United States, just as a lot of the countries in this world. Severe. No fault but our own. Now, no one can make us act according to what we believe, but the Vedic sages experienced that reality of the sacredness of all things and the interrelatedness of all things. So what do? We who are not so enlightened, we who are not Vedic sages, what do? Well, the old Vedanta dictum is if you don't have it, pretend like you do. If you don't have realization, pretend like you do. If you're not a Sthita Prajna, well, assume the qualities of what a Sthita Prajna is. If we don't recognize the divinity in all life, well, okay, pretend like we do. Pretend. Okay, I know that there is divinity in all life. I know that there is divinity in all beings. I don't feel it because of my own ignorance. But that doesn't alter the fact of the truth of the situation, that we're all connected and we relate to each other in and through divinity. This is the truth. Our ignorance is our own blockage. So in Vedanta, we always preach, act as if you are, and then you become aware of that reality. Then we realize it. Then we do it. So what do? On a daily day, in the devout Hindus in India, before they even get out of bed, before they even put their foot down, they ask Mother Earth to forgive them. Oh, Mother Earth, forgive me, I'm about to put my foot on your sacred body. Forgive me for that. Forgive me for putting the weight of my foot, my body, on your sacred body. So in 21st century America, modern day Vedantists, what do we do with that? How do we remove our weight and ask our Divine Mother Earth for forgiveness? What do we do? Well, what can we do? Well, may I suggest, first thing, don't use pesticides. Hello? Your pesticide doesn't know the difference between a good bug and a bad bug. All bugs are good. They all have their jobs. They're all part of this infinite circle of life. Don't use herbicides. They destroy the ground. Dirt isn't inert. They're composed of millions and millions of microbes, which we need. Oxygen comes from microbes. We need all those microbes. We need the worms. They're all part, just like we need the chipmunk. We need the worms. We need the microbes. Putting poison on anything is a really bad idea. It will come back to haunt us, and it has already. Avoid using plastic. There's nothing okay about plastic. Sometimes we don't have a choice, but if we have a choice, avoid buying it, avoid using it. Did you realize that the plastic, only 10% of the plastic in this country is ever recycled? Ever? 10%. You know what that plastic is doing? It's going to landfills. It's going into streams. The 10% that they say they're recycling, a lot of it's sending overseas. They don't recycle it either. It's going into their landfills. It's going into their streams. It's going to their oceans. This planet is interconnected and interrelated. You don't think that affects us? It affects everybody. Eat lower on the food chain. A full 1/5 of our greenhouse gases comes from meat consumption. The lower we eat on the food chain, happier the planet is. Buy locally if you can. Eat locally if you can. Simple things. Simple things. Just keeping it in mind. Treating all beings with respect and kindness, just as you would with your own child or your own mother. And remembering above all that if we really believe that all this is indeed Brahman, then our job as Vedantins is to act like it. Thank you.
Sister, thank you so much for your very inspiring and also very informative presentation on nature. There's so much to reflect on, so much to think about. Maybe one of the exercises we can all do in the coming week is ask ourselves, what is my understanding of nature? What is my relationship with nature? How is nature treating me and how I am treating nature? Swami Vivekananda once said that each soul is potentially divine and the goal is to manifest this divinity within by controlling nature, internal and external. And I think this is something that we all can do. How is the external nature connected with the internal nature, and how I'm related to them? So these are just a sets of questions, and there is not necessarily any one definitive answer to these questions, but it's very important that we ask them, because finding answers to questions like this will help us find answers to the most basic question of all, that the purpose of my own existence. And since all of this is interrelated, asking questions about nature and learning from nature is very, very important. So thank you so much for giving us a lot of food for thought about this. Next Sunday, Sister will be with us again, and since we are continuing with the reflections of the Gita, I requested her to speak on the Gita, and so she suggested that she will speak on some of her favorite verses from the Gita. So that will be a theme for the Satsang next Sunday. And here is something else that we can also do as we prepare for the next Satsang. Many of us here, we have studied Gita to a lesser or greater degree, and we can ask ourselves, Gita is a fairly big book, 700 verses. And in our own personal study of the Gita, we might have seen that certain verses speak to us more or feel more relevant than some others. So try to keep that thought at the back of your mind as well, that in your study of the Gita, which verses have been favorite of yours? Again, what is favorite now? Our favorites might change. Maybe 5 years later, different verses might become our favorite. But right now, at this moment, which are my favorite verses? So keep that thought at the back of your mind as well. And then next Sunday we can compare notes, whether some of our favorites are overlapping. So that's going forward. And then on Wednesday, we will continue with our study of Vivek Chudamani. That will be at 7:30 in the evening. And on Saturday, we will also have meditation at 6 o'clock. So these are the upcoming programs. We'll conclude with the prayer now. May the Divine Being, who is the Father in heaven of the Christians, Holy One of the Jewish faith, Allah of the Muslims, Buddha of the Buddhists, Tao of the Taoists, Ahura Mazda of the Zoroastrians, the Great Spirit of the Native Americans, and Brahman of the Hindus, lead us from the unreal to the real, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. May we be granted strength, freedom, and clear understanding. May we learn to see God in our own hearts and in everyone around us. May God bless us all and fill our hearts with gratitude, grace, and love. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto all.